This is my model for my 3D modeling assessment. I made sure to incorporate all the minimum requirements, which include edit polys, lofting, and NURBS. I didn't know how to start this model, and I eventually thought of starting my motherboard as it seemed to be the best starting point. I created this motherboard by starting with a box for a base. From here, I added another box and added an edit poly filter to it and messed around with the shape of it until I thought it fit my motherboard well enough. Here is an image of my motherboard. After I created this motherboard, I realized that I needed a PC case to put this in. So I attempted to use my Blender skills in 3ds Max and create a case for my PC using Edit Poly on a box. This failed miserably as it did not hollow out correctly and it created a shadow effect shown in the picture on the screen, so I decided to start again. I next attempted to create 4 planes and turn them into a hollow box, which worked perfectly. I left the front part as I needed a way for you to see the interior of the model. Keep in mind, the early stages of my PC build did not have the hollow box at the front with the glass, purely on the basis that I did not know how to do that until pretty much the very end of me modeling my PC. I learnt and used new modifiers such as bend, shell, and twist. I also learnt new tools such as connect and chamfer. The first issue I ran into was the length and width of the segments of the rectangle. My lack of knowledge of the software caused me to be stuck on this issue for a while, and luckily I managed to find the problem within an hour. Here is a short clip of me showing the problem and how to fix it. However, the main problem I ran into was the chamfer tool. In the tutorial, he added 3 segments to the chamfer, and when I copied this, my model did not look like the model in the tutorial. I eventually figured out this was because I did not click the plus icon in the chamfer tool pop-up like he did. The picture on screen is what my chamfer looked like after I created the model and added the modifiers to it. As you can see, this does not look correct. Unfortunately, this was not clear in the video as there was no voiceover and he very quickly clicked on it. Next, I ran into an issue with the gizmo. When I was bending the model, it wasn't working at all, and I found out the solution for this was to deselect the model and reselect it, like shown in the example on screen. This took me way too long to figure out. Once I figured that part out, I decided to create the rest on my own. This really enhanced my knowledge of 3ds Max, as everything became much easier once I got the hang of how to use the software more. Overall, I believe that the fans are my favourite part about this model as a whole, purely on the time spent on them and the knowledge I gained from creating them. Here is a picture of the fan when I finally made some progress on it. I used the fan I had created as a base for my GPU, placing it at the bottom and creating a box on top to start the shape of it. I then added in details of the heatsink and a transparent glass for a top so you can see inside of it. I believe that creating my GPU was the start of learning how to utilize 3ds Max, as I noticed that I was creating everything much faster than before. For example, in order to clone an object, I would press Ctrl C, which would create a camera and a copy of the object. From there, I would then delete the camera and move the new cloned object into the position I wanted it to go. Sometimes, deleting the camera would take a while, as when I clicked on it, the rename pop-up would occur. This caused a lot of frustration when working on it. During the creation progress of my GPU, I found out that if you have clicked on an object and hold shift and drag the object, it clones it, and you let go. And you can add more than one cloned object to the model. If you selected more than one, the clones would be perfectly symmetrical in space and would look fantastic. Here is an example of this. For the CPU, I created a basic edit poly shape and linked it to my water cooling. I linked these together using lofting, which was hard in the beginning, but once I got the hang of it, it became a very easy task. The main issue I had with this was creating the line correctly. I fixed this issue by changing the viewport to top, down, left, right, and then editing the line from there. To create the power supply, I simply created a rectangle box as shown in the video. It did not have to be detailed, as my power supply for my PC is simply a box with interior parts which I could not find online. However, I did notice at the back of my power supply there was a fan. I thought, as I hadn't already, I should create a fan using NURBS. I used this tool to create a fan-like shape shown in the picture on the screen, and then messed around with the levels of it to add a bend. I added a shell to the NURB to add some thickness to it also. After I had merged everything into one 3ds Max file, I animated all the fans by clicking on Auto key, then select on Set keys and started from 0 frames and ended at 100 frames. At 100 frames, I would click on Auto key and Set keys, then rotate the fan 360 degrees and click again on both to deselect them. This created a spin animation for the fans. I then clicked on Time Configuration and added a loop to the animation so the fans permanently spun. I ran out of space to put my RAM, so I used an edit poly modifier on the lofting model of my water cooling pipe to move it away from the RAM space so I can fit one in. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit any more in, as it would have messed up the lofting model too much. That is one thing I can always look out for in the future. Overall, I really hated doing this assignment at first, as I strongly disliked 3ds Max and how different it was from Blender. From the smallest things of changing the scale of an object to the larger things such as important keybinds to go into edit mode, etc. However, by the end of the assignment, I really enjoyed modelling on 3ds Max, and I'm glad I had this experience to improve my skills and create transferable skills that I can use in the future. I think it is quite interesting to see how far my skills in 3ds Max improved from this project, as I can see from the first model I created, the motherboard, to the last model I created, the water cooling, had drastically different looks about them. Looking back, I can see that my motherboard is not very detailed and only has an edit poly filter on it, whereas my water cooling has a shell modifier to add thickness to the plane, animated fans created using a shell, blend and twist modifier, and lofting to connect a pipe from the cooler to the CPU. Edit note. Here's a funny bug I had when I added a new animation fan to the model.